We're at the hour. Why don't you officially kick us off and then we'll run with it?
I could kick us off. I don't know what we're kicking off to, but
Well,
I would imagine these gentlemen here are going to let the property owners know what's happening.
Yeah, I'm Jim Bernard, the airport director, and also with me tonight is our staff for this project. We have Susan Doherty, the admin assistant that many of you have already talked to. Misha Schwartz of GHD, our environmental consultant. Jim Aboides is the project manager from Van Neer Incorporated, and Jimmy Paulding is his assistant from Van Neer. Again, they're our construction management firm. Nancy Diamond is our special counsel for this issue, as our regular attorney, Bob Black, has recused himself from the RSA project. So Nancy will be representing us throughout this and has been for some time. I would just start it off by saying that it is my job to develop these projects, and you're all behind. This particular one is a safety project that the FAA is requiring us to do. So I pulled together some basic ideas of what it is we have to do, and then find the consultants to help me get the job done. It's obviously more than I can do by myself. Other projects or improvement projects that we wish to take on, this one unfortunately is not one of those. It's one where we are required to do. But nonetheless, I get the ball started and get the people around me that can help put projects together, which is what I have here tonight. And with that, I'll let our construction management team and Jimmy Paulding go ahead and lead us through a brief summary of the project.
I just want to interrupt real quick. We got through the feedback for that they can't hear you. So you're going to turn around and talk to the audience and kind of have to
Take the mic. Okay.
or make sure you get speaking to the mic.
Very good.
Thank you, and thanks, Jim. With that, I'm going to go ahead and give an introduction presentation as to exactly why we're here today. If you see the first slide, we're going to cover a few different things, give a background on the project, some of the goals, the funding and schedule associated with it, the land acquisition and transaction process, as well as next steps, and then hear comments and concerns from you folks. BCRAA is the Border Coast Regional Airport Authority, and it's a local public agency formed through a joint powers agreement. And it was done back in 2007 to bring Del Norte County, Crescent City, the City of Brookings, the County of Curry, the Smith River Rancheria, and the Elk Valley Rancheria together as one regional decision-making body to make decisions regarding critical public transportation facility improvements, such as modernizations to the airport in efforts to maintain the airport and improve it. The scope of the airport improvement program that we're talking about today entails the construction of a high safety priority congressionally mandated runway safety area project, as Jim mentioned, and associated infrastructure, as well as a new terminal. All of this to be funded mostly through FAA federal funds. If you see here on the screen, the areas at both ends of the runway in green are the runway safety areas that are to be constructed. The current habitat that exists there now is a wetland environment. As a result of the construction of this project, the California Coastal Commission is requiring that the environmental impact, the conversion of these wetlands to this runway safety area, be offset by dedicating land elsewhere to environmental restoration, specifically the creation of wetlands. The Coastal Commission has required that approximately a 4-to-1 ratio is utilized, meaning that for every 1 acre of runway safety area that's created, or 1 acre of wetland disturbed on the airport site, there has to be about 4 acres of that land created, or a wetland created, on another site, which basically equates to about 68 total acres of land needed in another location to create this wetland environment. You may ask exactly what this pertains to Pacific Shores, and a lot of you already know. As a result of the environmental review process that's been ongoing to not only evaluate Pacific Shores as a potential mitigation area to meet these requirements, there's been an ongoing process to evaluate it from all the legal requirements. And for that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Nancy Diamond, our special legal counsel, to explain the logistics.
Thank you, Jimmy. So the environmental review that's been done to date involves, state and federal parallel processes. They were initiated for the Runway Safety Area Improvement Project, and they evaluated the impacts of that project as proposed and identified mitigation requirements of the RSA project. They discussed 5 different potential locations where the off-site mitigation that Jimmy mentioned could occur, one of them being the Pacific Shores area. The federal process, the environmental process followed at the federal level, was under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, and that was conducted by the FAA. It resulted in what's called an environmental assessment, or an EA, in July of 2012, and a finding of no significant impact on the environment in August of 2012. This entity, the Border Coast Regional Airport Authority, under California state law, the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, completed an environmental impact review, NEIR, in December of 2011. Both of the processes involved public scoping sessions, public review and comment. There were agencies, private individuals, entities that participated in that review process. And the agencies in particular, of which there are many, most of whom will have permitting and regulatory control over various aspects of this project, include the Regional Water Quality Control Board, the California Coastal Commission, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, the Army Corps of Engineers, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, it used to be Department of Fish and Game, and obviously I mentioned the FAA. These agencies, through their participation, identified Pacific Shores as the most viable of the 5 different areas looked at, largely because of the size of the area that could be utilized at Pacific Shores for wetland restoration. And this is specifically the roads that could be removed and converted to wetland. As a result of this relatively recent analysis and determination, we now have Pacific Shores, as I said, as a viable mitigation alternative. We now are reaching out to the Pacific Shores property owners to determine which parcels, if any, the Pacific Shores property owners are going to be interested in selling to us. And we will be conducting additional environmental review associated with the process through the completion of additional environmental studies, engineering and technical analyses of the impacts of road removal. They will be incorporated into the environmental impact report as an addendum. As we've said previously, this project is simply, right now at the stage we're in this project, is simply to begin to identify willing sellers. It's not clear yet. We have not completed enough studies to identify exactly which roads are coming out and which parcels will be impacted or affected, if any at all. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thanks, Nancy. So to basically reiterate what Nancy was saying, the goal of this meeting is to basically notify and inform property owners at Pacific Shores subdivision of the project, of the current status of the environmental review, and to also convey some of the schedule and funding constraints that are associated with the project. Right now, the airport is hoping to complete everything needed, including this mitigation, including the acquisition of this property, in order to obtain grant funds in the current FAA grant cycle, which means that everything has to be completed by June 1st of this year. If BCRAA can't do that, then they move into the next grant cycle, which means they'll be competing with a whole host of other airports, because the runway safety areas are not only a requirement for this airport, but for all national commercial airports. The intent is to identify sellers and enter into purchase agreements by June of this year, and then hopefully close escrow at late 2013 or early 2014. Just to give an indication as to some of the information that we've received as a result of the letter that was sent out, we have, as of 4 p.m. today, out of about 744 lots, we've received 36% approximately, or 271 responses. 76%, or 205 properties, have expressed interest and would like more information. 17% have indicated that they are not interested, and 7% provided a response that was unclear. All right, so the purpose, again, of this meeting is to also clarify some questions that have been asked with regard to the project. And I'll start with reiterating what Nancy said about the evaluation that has been completed to date. It's basically looked at Pacific Shores to see if it is the right size and has the right existing characteristics to meet the mitigation requirements. We've also want to indicate today that with regard to existing roads, existing county roads, which basically consist of the majority of the project, the removing of those roads or turning those roads into wetlands, and the type and number of properties needed. Basically what it is that in order for this project to work, there has to be contiguous blocks of properties that are turned into a wetland environment, and so the roads that access those properties would be removed. And so any property or any property owner here that's not interested in selling their property would obviously continue to have access to their property, and this project wouldn't in any way, shape, or form restrict access to it. Another question that's been asked is, what is the purchase price of the property? And to respond to that, the airport has obtained a professional appraiser who will be completing market valuation of the property. That's to happen within the next 60 days, and it'll be done in accordance with federal regulations. And once that's completed, then the airport will make an offer. At that time, you folks, property owners, will have the opportunity to sell their property. The regulations also include a second qualified appraiser that will review that appraisal or that market valuation. The airport will pay for costs associated with escrow, title, and recording expenses. All right, so some of the next steps are to continue to identify the interest, willingness of property owners, go through the market or the property valuations, negotiations, and then enter into the purchase agreement. With that, we'd like to turn it over to public input and response, gather feedback from folks that are both in person here today and who are streaming in on the computer. We'd prefer to have property owners speak first and identify yourself with your name and your lot number if you have it handy. And then after that, we'd like to handle some of the folks that are streaming in online first before we have the folks here present speak.
Jimmy, if you would, I would like to clarify one point, and that is that when we talk about road removal, we have to own all the lots adjacent to that road. So if we don't buy the lots, we don't remove that piece of road because we can't legally landlock anybody. So the idea here is that we buy up all the lots to enable us to remove sections of roads, and the lot purchase obviously has to happen first.
And not all lots will fit the criteria.
Right.
Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and have the folks that are online. Okay, we'll go ahead and do the folks here first, and if you're a property owner, we'd prefer that you go first. Anybody here have any comments or questions? Anybody online? Okay. Any general questions?
Where does the money come from to pay for the lots?
The money for the lots will be FAA grant funding.
Repeat the question for everybody.
The question that was asked is, where does the money come from to pay for the lots?
It
And
comes from the Aviation Improvement Program, AIP trust fund that the FAA manages for this, for improvements to airports.
oh yeah.
Who besides private individuals owning these lots at this time?
Well, roughly half of the lots are owned by Fish and Game. I believe somewhere near 725. The county has about roughly 30, I believe, or 27. And then there's an undisclosed amount in tax default that I don't know what the number that is right now.
So no organizations or anything from prior purchases owning any lots out there?
I think the Smith River Alliance has two, as we recently found out, that were donated to them last year. Other than that, I'm not aware of anybody. There probably are groups, I don't know.
Any other questions?
This may be way out there, but is it possible with Fish and Game lands to get those sold to the county, have FAA pay us for those in lieu taxes that they haven't paid us?
Well, one of the things that we have to do here is enter into negotiations with the county for the roads, and that type of arrangement could come into play at that time, because obviously a lot of the roads are going to be in front of Fish and Game parcels. So how we know what conditions go into the negotiations are yet to be seen. But that could come into play.
Okay, a question that's been asked online is, is there any obligation to sell a property if they express interest now? That would be the property owner, or that would be the airport. Can we refuse an appraiser's offer when made?
There is no obligation at all, and an offer will be made to the identified parcels, and the property owner is under no obligation of any sort. The FAA guidelines protect the property owner's interests in this regard. It is a fully negotiated process, and the property owner can bow out at any time up until a formal purchase and sale agreement is reached and signed.
Okay, another question has been asked online. How does judgment against the state for takings damages due to flooding enter into the agreement?
Into the appraisal.
Oh, into the appraisal.
The appraisal will be conducted using the required standards, state and federal appraisal methods. And that process has to be followed to the extent that whatever damages awards have been made or confirmed in Pacific Shores, the valuations of those damages would have to show through the appraisal process. So for example, if the appraisal process is using a sales comparison, then the damage award would have to show through that methodology. So it is a process that we cannot influence. It is one that is required by the FAA in terms of how the appraiser conducts his analysis.
Nancy, I'm not sure everybody got that. Could you give an example maybe of how that would work?
Well, the appraiser has a protocol to follow under his license as well as under the FAA guidelines. And his protocol requires that, I'm not a licensed appraiser, so I can't say exactly what he does, but it involves him making an analysis of what is considered by appraisers to be the highest and best use of the property. And that is generally done through sales comparisons. There are other methods.
But if I can just jump in before we get too carried away, I think I think they're wanting to know what the effect of the judgment is going to do with their appraisal. Is that going to be considered part of the?
Well, the appraisal will be looking at sales, and if recent sales have included the value of the judgment, then it would show through the appraisal process. If recent, if the court process has impacted the marketability of the parcels such that somebody has actually purchased a parcel because of either a perceived lower value or a higher value, that is how the information would factor into the appraisal process. So the appraiser is not sitting down with a judgment in front of him and saying that he is going to deduct a certain percentage or add a certain percentage. Instead, the appraiser is evaluating basically what the market will define the property worth to be.
So the appraiser, if I owned a piece of property and I got a judgment and awarded a certain amount, that will not have an effect on the appraisal, other than determining the value of that property. Is that right?
Right.
Would I be allowed to sell my property at the value that they came up with and still be awarded the funds from the takings?
Well, now my understanding
Judgment?
is that the trial court jury award is under appeal. So I am not representing any parties in interest, so I do not know all the ins and outs of that
Right.
litigation. I have
Yeah,
to give that
and
disclaimer.
I was just wanting
Right.
to know if if the appraisal, and can I just pick a number out of the hat that doesn't mean anything? Please don't take this as a number. I'm just throwing a number out there. But let's say they come up with $20,000 a lot, and I got a judgment for $20,000 a lot. Would I be able to sell my lot for $20,000 and take the judgment for $20,000?
Without knowing how the court process plays out, my understanding right now is that the two are entirely distinct.
Okay.
That the jury award was based on a concept of loss of use over a certain time period. And for that reason, it means that persons that may have been plaintiffs in the litigation but no longer own the property could actually recover those damages if they own that property during the time period for which the award was granted. But we need to be talking to the current property owner, who
Right.
may be different than a named plaintiff.
Exactly.
And that current property owner will be talking to us.
Okay,
So
thank you, I appreciate that.
I'm glad you
I
asked.
didn't mean to make it complicated, I was
No.
trying to simplify.
I'm glad you asked that.
The lawsuit was for damages for previous ills, and it was separate from all this process.
Absolutely separate, entirely separate. Different parties, different entities, a different process. I know it's a complication.
Could help set the appraised value.
If it is, from what I understand, again, not being an appraiser, if those damages are reflected in market prices and in sales that have happened, then they would impact the appraised market valuation.
Okay, we have a few more questions. When will you know which lots are in question?
So currently, we know which road segments would result in wetlands being created. And you saw a map earlier that Jimmy presented, and there are roads that are in red, and then there's roads that are in blue. And we've made a physical analysis and looked, and if the road's removed, we expect wetlands to come back without removing more than just the road prism itself. And where other roads would come out that are shown in blue without substantial excavation, we would create an upland condition. And as mentioned earlier, we are primarily looking for areas to create wetlands. So that's sort of the primary level there. And then there's other constraints that come to play, including biological constraints that are associated with some of the roads. And then obviously the constraint would be willing sellers and be able to acquire those parcels. And then last but not least, it's anticipated that there will be significant portions of roads maintained for access, and those roads are constrained and would not be utilized for wetlands creation.
Another question, will there be any consideration in swapping for like property?
Jim Bernard here. That is a subject that is under consideration, that we may be able to trade lots, but we need to flesh that out a little bit and see what that might entail. I'm not able to say at this time that it will work, but it could, and it is being looked into.
Another question, are there certain areas at Pacific Shores that are of more interest than others?
I think that builds on the last response I had, and yes, as you can see in this map here, the roads that are colored in red are roads that are of primary interest from the conversion standpoint. We can't just acquire land for the impacts that Jimmy had alluded to earlier. We have to take an upland situation and make it a wetland in order to get our credit. And so again, that's what the map you see here, and I have already discussed some of the other constraints that will be utilized to ultimately decide which road segments will be removed.
Another question, how do we confirm that our interest in selling has been received?
The next step of confirmation for us will be by mail and or by phone for phone numbers that we have. Postcard to make sure we have your phone number would be a good idea. But our next step is to make you an offer when we have an evaluation completed. And as mentioned earlier, that'll probably be about 60 days before we have that number to make you an offer.
Excuse me, Jimmy. I believe that this particular person was interested in knowing that the postcard that they sent in this far has been received, and any of them are welcome to give a call to 707-464-7288 or email the address that you have on the last slide when you get there. If they want to make sure that their postcard's been received and logged, they're welcome to do that.
Do we have any more online questions? Okay. Okay, another question we had online. Did you receive the letter from Kelly Smith? You have not acknowledged his correspondence.
We received, I believe it was today, a letter from Attorney Kelly Smith representing many of the property owners at Pacific Shores. And he has several questions in that letter that I believe we have addressed, environmental analysis on Pacific Shores and how it will be conducted. Why has BCRAA, this border coast, failed to notice and coordinate with the owners earlier? And that is simply that we have been actually publicly noticing all of our processes as required, but we've only just identified the viable project at Pacific Shores, and we're notifying the property owners at the soonest possible time. There's a question here that I actually don't think is a fair question. It alludes to a prior purchase project that the Fish and Game, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, formerly Fish and Game, was involved in, and apparently some of those property owners felt that they were mistreated. And since this border coast entity is an entirely different entity, this is an entirely different project, I don't think it's appropriate for me to be addressing those questions. I will let Jim, if he has anything to say to that.
Well, I would just say that this site has a long and sordid history, and I'm not familiar with all the details, nor have I been around long enough to know what went down and when, but we're trying to be, in this presentation and in this project, as transparent as we can and present the owners with an honest opportunity that they have every chance to say no to right up until the time we sign papers. So there's no coercion, there's no strong arm tactics, if you will. It's a simple yes or no negotiation.
Another question. Is the map of quote-unquote target roads available for inspection after this meeting, perhaps online?
Jimmy, this second question is along that same line. Is there a web address that will allow us to see a larger map of the roads marked red and blue? I think that they're having a difficulty seeing it.
Okay.
There is a web address. It's flycrescentcity.com. The Fly Crescent City being one word, and we will put the map you saw tonight up there, although it is draft and subject to change depending on input and participation.
Any more questions? Yep.
How many linear feet of road do you need to create your 68 acres of wetland? Any of the parcels that you buy, if they have wetland potential or wetlands on them, be used?
I don't know the actual the feet exactly. We could calculate it pretty easily, but the road widths that are paved now are at 24 feet, and that ranges a tenth or two of a foot here and there, depending where you measure it. So for every linear foot of road we convert, we get 24 square feet of credit. And we currently have about 16.7 acres of wetlands that are being impacted, and depending upon the final mitigation ratios agreed to by the agencies, that would dictate the linear feet. So I don't know that exactly, but it's probably about, currently we're probably looking at removing maybe a third to half of the roads to meet our creation ratio.
More questions? No more streaming in? Okay. At this time, we're going to go ahead and conclude the meeting. You can submit follow-up questions to the email address on the PowerPoint slide.
Let's give them just a few minutes in case they're typing. Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to go ahead and give a few more minutes just in case anybody else comes up with additional questions. For those at home, we understand that you're having to type them out. Question in the back.
If in theory, they don't find enough properties for the mitigation, will they use eminent domain?
There's no plan. The BCRAA board cannot use eminent domain. That would be up to the Board of Supervisors, and I have not heard any inclination that we would entertain that idea. But again, that's not our call.
You mentioned that you have 5 sites located for mitigation. Can you use a combination of the sites to achieve your 68 acres?
Yes. We could. This has been, Pack Shores has been identified as the highest quality wetlands available possibly for this type of mitigation and the most contiguous. So the desire is to stay in one spot, but if we fall short, we'll have to branch out and put together different packages of what kind of land we have. And some of the sites we surveyed before had very little, if any, wetland creation capability. So it's entirely possible we would not receive one-to-one credit, but some fraction thereof.
What standard are we using to determine about that? Army Corps, Fish and Game, coastal?
I believe coastal. Is that not correct?
That it's really both. Really, the Corps of Engineers uses a 3-parameter approach, and the Coastal Commission uses a 1-parameter approach to identify wetlands. For the RSA impacts that are happening on the airport side, that wetland is the same amount. We're not seeing any really 1-parameter wetland, so the 16.77 is both. And both agencies have agreed that removing the roads at Pacific Shores, whether they're inundated or may have some vegetation on them, we're going to get credit for 24 feet wide. Like also to add on Mr. Bernard's explanation of the 5 sites, when the EIR and the EA, NEPA and CEQA document were circulated, there was an appendice to that, volume 2, and within that appendice there was a conceptual mitigation plan in there, and the plan alluded to these 5 or 6 sites. Several of those sites have fallen out, one because of disfavor from the agencies and the lack really of available creation, and also some have fallen out because of the inconsistencies that would occur with regards to conversion of certain types of areas. For instance, prime ag lands to wetlands is not allowed under the Coastal Act, so some of those sites have pretty much disappeared from a valid regulatory standpoint.
24 feet wide, you would need almost 24 miles of road to get your mitigation measures for 68 acres. That's half the 57 miles that are out there.
That's what I had alluded to, that I figured that it was about half the roads at this point that we're looking to remove.
That's a big impact.
What's the total road mileage?
The question was, what's the total road mileage at Pack Shores?
And I thought it was 27 miles total at Pacific Shores, and
So that's almost every road out there.
that's your calculation must not be correct then, because I know it's not.
Do it for a living, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Along in the same vein, another question we received, does cite 27 miles? It's a separate question. It says, if you remove a third to a half of the roads, what are you going to do with the debris?
well, that 27 miles must be wrong because I know we're not removing all the roads. It's currently proposed for about, again, maybe a little over half the roads. But again, that's a target that we have not actually completely determined at this point with the agencies. We are working with the agencies and submitting permits and working through those plans, including other technical documents. And then I guess there was a follow-up question with regards to what are we doing with the debris or with the road material. So there will be two types of materials we're going to end up with. One type of material is going to be an organic material, which will consist of vegetation and the such. We would hope to reutilize that and chip it and use it as part of our erosion control for our mitigation. And the second type of material we'll end up with is the road base itself and what's left of the asphalt, and that would be proposed to be ground up and it may be reused on some of the existing gravel roads out there that would remain. It may possibly be used as part of the RSA project for fill, although the timing could be a problem for that. And if not either of those, then we would anticipate it will be stockpiled and will be utilized by the county for their road-based considerations. We do have a geotechnical report on that material, and it's been tested, and so it will be usable for all those three purposes.
Wait a few more minutes.
How many total lots are there on the Pacific Coast?
1,500, I think.
1,500 plus 54, I think, or something like that. And I believe Michigan owns 725 or thereabouts.
So if you're gonna take out almost all the roads, it's a pretty Herculean effort.
Well, it is a Herculean effort, and it is also a very aggressive schedule to be permitted. Now, the county has indicated through, not the board level, but the planning level, what roads they'd like to keep for access around the perimeter and through the middle. You'll notice if you go back to the map, Jimmy, the white roads have been indicated as roads the county wishes to keep, so they would not be in play at this point.
And with regards to the 27 miles, we're using a 4-to-1 ratio on that, I suspect, is how you got to that number?
I just took 24 feet times the distance, a mile divided by 43560, the number of square feet in an acre, I
Right.
was using 2.90 acres per mile road.
Right.
It's pretty simple
Right.
math.
Yep. So depending on what kind of ratio we have out there is going to depend on how many roads we take, and obviously the higher the mitigation ratio that is predicated by the agencies, the more roads we got to take. So if the ratio comes out at 2-to-1, obviously fewer roads will need to be removed than if we end up with a 4-to-1 ratio. We have a mitigation package that includes other components than aside from road removal, but the other components of our mitigation package are not associated with wetland creation. They're associated with habitat enhancement and special species habitat enhancement and other components like that.
Anything else coming in? No, I think we could go ahead and wrap up here. Thanks, Julie. Reiterate the next steps, if you would.
So the next steps are to continue this process. Basically, if there's enough sellers that are willing, then the appraisal, is moving forward anyway. But that'll be done in about 60 days, and the airport or the authority will make an offer, and it'll be up to property owners to take the airport up on that opportunity. After that, there'll be a negotiation period, and that'll all be handled within the requirements set forth by the FAA. and then the purchase agreement, which needs to be in hand by June of this year. If there are no more questions, we'll conclude the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Chief, one more question, Director.
Okay, there's one more question.
But
The question was asked, who is doing the appraisals?
Warren and Schiffmacher is the name of the firm. Well, their central office is in Reno, Nevada. The appraiser is certified in California and Nevada.
I think that's it. Everybody have a good night.